Today we're talking about the simpler and the sampler. These are two ways of manipulating samples or sounds with MIDI. That's the best way I can explain them. And they kind of do the same thing, but in different ways. The biggest difference between the simpler and the sampler is that the simpler only works with one sound, whereas the sampler works with up to 128. And if that's a little confusing, deciding when you would use each, I'll just tell you when I use each in this video. I'm just going to explain the situations when I would use each one, but I'll show you the differences. This right here, the bottom, is the simpler right here. Super simple simpler right here. And this right here is the sampler. Don't look at my bar. It's the sampler. I can't pull it up to make it any bigger, so I'm just going to have to zoom in when I'm editing or something like that. But yeah, that's what these look like. They're pretty similar, but they do have different functions, and I'll show the examples when I would use each. So I'm going to start with the simpler here, and we're just going to put in, we'll put in this sound right here. So the simpler lets you manipulate MIDI. You can see I have my MIDI keyboard. I'm just playing in the notes, or you can press M and you'll see this little keyboard shows up. And this lets you use your computer keyboard, not keyboard, and you just press the notes. Or you press your keys, A, S, D, F, G, H, J, K, you know, and you can play it like that way. If you don't have a MIDI keyboard, it's whatever. You can see here, so I'll play in some notes. Oh, there's we gotta get rid of this. There you go. So you can use MIDI to trigger the sample here. And over here, down here, we got the 3 playback modes. There's classic, one shot, and slice. So the biggest thing I noticed that's different from classic and one shot is that here, I'll show you. Classic will only play as long as the MIDI note is, right? It only triggers the sound for as long as this MIDI note is. So I'll make the first one short, this one's long, this one's short. And you can see right here, this little, well, you gotta catch it right there, boom. That shows you how far in the sample it's being played. And when you have it short like this, it cuts off after this MIDI sample or this MIDI note ends. So this is all empty space. This will play it all the way through. That's the main thing I've noticed about classic. Another thing about it is that it allows for polyphonic playback. If you don't know what that means, it's pretty much just means you can play multiple notes at one time. Like you can play chords like that. That sounds fantastic. You can do stuff like that. That's a really cool sound. Listen, and you can see, oh, that's not the note. You can see down here, I'm playing multiple notes. That's mainly what classic is for. If you look down here for one shot, the thing about one shot is it's a one shot. It'll play the entire note all the way through, or the entire sound all the way through. So you'll notice the biggest difference. I have this one note with classic, it would cut off right here. But on one shot, it plays all the way through. You see? So that's like the biggest difference I noticed between classic and one shot. Also with one shot, it's monophonic. So you only have one note. There's only one sound that can play at a time. So you can't do chords. You see, I'm pressing all these buttons, these keys. Only one sound is being triggered at a time. So those are the main differences I've noticed between these two. And then slice, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I never use slice. I don't even know what the fuck this thing's for. So I'm not even gonna talk about it. I'm not even gonna pretend like I know. I don't use it. So you gotta find a different video for that one if you want to know what that does. All right. So for classic, we're gonna just look at the functions. Here you got gain, changes the gain, volume of the sample, make it super loud. My ears, make it super quiet. Hey, can you speak up? I can't hear you. Next we have start, and that changes where the start of the sample will be. So you can start at the beginning, you can start it at the middle, start at the end, no sound. Oh no. So, and it shows you where the start is, like with this gray and yellow. The yellow is what will be played. The gray is what's getting silenced or muted. It's not being played, it changes. The start is where, the gray meets the yellow on the horizon line in the distance or whatever. And then the length, We're going to talk about loop in just a second because we can't actually do anything. It's grayed out. Length is how long the sample is. And upon first adjusting this, you think that's just where the sample ends. That is wrong. That's not quite where it is. Because if we move the length back here and then we move the start, it'll move this chunk, right? So length literally is the length of the sample. So you can see. It's the length of the sample like that. So then put everything back. You just double click to reset things to the default value. If we move and put loop on, this shows the playback loop. And this is tied to the length. It's tied to the end length of the sample. So with loop, this part right here, this blue square is what's going to be looped. So you see, I'll hold the note. And this right here is being looped. Now, this is good if you want to take a sound and kind of sustain it. And I guess the sound is a good example. You notice how, actually, I have a better example down here. For this note, you'll see normally it'll sound like this. I think I'm flat or I'm sharp. That's what it sounds like. But if I loop it like this, you see how it's kind of a sustained note now? And you'll see it'll get looped right there. And it kind of gives the illusion of a sustained note, right? And we can play it out as such. So if I want to just like play a chord for super long, we can just go. That sounds like, I don't know, fucking siren songs coming to sink your ship. But there you go. There's that. And then with this fade thing, you can make it sound a bit cleaner with the fades. You hear how it changes. You see, it just lets you fade it in and out from a further position. And you can also see what's being looped by looking at the flag, the playback, the orange thing. You can use that to kind of clean up some sounds if it's a little clicky or if it just doesn't sound right. So that's when I'd use that. All right, up next, right below loop, there's snap. I don't know what snap does. I've never used it. Don't worry about it. Or you can find someone else who does. Voices is the maximum amount of sounds that can be played back at a time. That's the best way I can explain it. It's the best number of simultaneous voices. So if I'm playing a chord, you see I have voices at 1. You can see I'm trying to play a chord. I'll bring up the... You see, I'm trying to play a chord. I'm trying to play 4 sounds at once, 4 notes at once, and it's not happening. They're only giving me the 1. If I change it to 3, it gives me all 3. Man, this is a terrible sound here. I'll use this one. Or maybe I'm just playing gross chords. You see, it'll play all 3. But it won't play more than 3. You see, we're still only getting that triad chord. And if you can't really hear that, you just got to trust me. It's only playing 3 notes. And I can, you can hear the difference if I make the voices fucking 32 and I play all these notes. There you go. You can hear everything. You hear all the sounds. So that's just something to keep in mind. If your chords, like if you're not getting the 9th or whatever, the full thing in your chord, maybe you have the voices set to something weird. I don't know. So next, there's this retrigger, and I'll actually talk about retrigger once we get down to the ADSR stuff, because I'm going to need to adjust the ADSR to really show what retrigger does. So we'll get to that in a minute. Next, we have the warp modes here. And if you don't know what the warp modes are, I just made a video about it. I'll link it. I'll put it like right here or something. It's the exact same. It's, you got beats, tones, texture, repitch, complex, bro. It's pretty much just how the playback. Oh, I punched my mic. It's pretty much just how the playback of the sample is going to be processed. Yeah. One important thing to note is if you don't have the warp mode on, when you're playing this sample at different like notes or different octaves, the higher I play it, you hear how it gets shorter compared to. If you don't want that, which you probably wouldn't want for like an 808, because it might make your sample sound too short. It might mess with the timing. It might just not sound how you want it to. Remember, you can change it to complex, and now you see it's the same length. It keeps the integrity and the length of the sample. And here you also have the same thing, the bars, you can double the length. This is all the same stuff I talked about before. So, this is a series of videos. You got to start from season 1. You shouldn't just be jumping here, Well, I mean, you can. I should probably make videos that you could just jump into. You don't got to watch the plugin first season to understand the season 2 of Ableton tutorials. So next, we're going to look at the controls. We've gone through all the sample stuff. Down here, we have the controls. And right here, it's just a little filter for the sound. Just cool. Honestly, I normally wouldn't even really use this. I'd rather just use like auto filter over here or any other filtering plugin, but it's cool. It's here. You got all this, you have your resonance and all that. You can turn it on and off. You can change the slope. I would rather use auto filter just because you have more control. It's its own filtering plugin, but it's there. It's cool. You turn it on and off with this square. Over here, we have the LFO. And, it's an LFO. And if you don't know what an LFO is, it's used for modulation. Imagine you have like a little knob, and when you turn it up, it modulates whatever you assign it to. That, I don't know if that really explained it well. How about I'll draw you a picture. All right. So the LFO is like having a little knob that modulates things that you're just twisting back and forth. So we have our little knob right here. This is our LFO knob. I don't know how to draw a knob, right? That's our LFO knob. And it's set to modulate at a sine wave, which is this. So it'll make it go up and it'll make it go down, And then we would assign that to, say, the volume, right? So we turn up the LFO, which is this, and this will assign this sine wave going up and down to the volume. So the volume will go up and down. So here, we'll set it to this sine wave here. And then right here, we'll put it at the volume, 100%. So it'll go from 100% volume to 0% volume. And I'll play the sound. Hear that? Well, it's on 116. Hold on, let me make it a longer thing. There we go. This would be better with the sustained sample. So we'll put the volume 100%. Hear that? So it's modulating the volume to go up and down and up and down. You can change the waveform it uses. It's basic LFO stuff, but if you don't know what an LFO is or what it does, well, here you go. You can assign that to like pitch, a bunch of other things. And this sounds like Earthbound. You can assign it to the pan and to the filter. There's a bunch of different things you can do. And then there's the attack and the offset right here and the key and everything. The LFO is changed by the pitch of the key that you play. It's all some neat stuff. It's really cool for like sound design and modulation. So if you're interested in that, you can mess around with it. I don't use it too much, but I figured, it was good to at least let you know that it's there. Honestly, I don't use much of the controls at all with the Simpler. Over here, we have ADSR, which is, the classic attack, delay, sustain, attack, decay, sustain, release. It's, simple stuff. If I turn it all the way up, actually, you can see when I'm pressing the note. Right here, I'm pressing it right. Okay, and it starts right away. If I put the attack all the way up to like 3 seconds. Hey, this is me from the future when editing. I just want to explain attack a little bit better. It's really just the time it takes for the envelope after getting triggered to reach the maximum output. So it's the time it takes for you to reach the 100% volume. So since we set it to 3 seconds, it'll take 3 seconds for the 100% volume of the sample to be output. So I'll show you when I'm pressing a note right now. So it kind of fades it in. So next we have decay, and I'm going to talk about decay and sustain because they kind of go hand in hand. Decay is the rate, and then sustain is the level. So decay is the time that it takes for the envelope of the sound to reach the sustained volume level. And I know that probably sounds like a bunch of just like bullshit, but that's like technically what it is. The best way I could show it would be with this. So if you look at this little envelope, this is literally how the sound is being like processed and played. So I'm going to press it. It's going to go to this volume peak here, and then it's going to drop off. So the sustain is how low or how high it drops off, like how much volume it drops off at. So if I leave it, it's going to stay how it is. If I put it all the way at the bottom, the volume will not be sustained. And the decay is just how long it takes for you to get to that sustained point. So the decay is really good for making plucks. Sustain and delay in conjunction is usually how people make, like, you see how I just turned this flute into like a one shot? See, it's pretty long because of the decay. It's a 60-second decay. So it's going to play the whole thing. If I make it super short, oh, it's too loud. If I make it super short, it's like a pluck. You hear that? And you can even see with the sample. You see, nothing else is being played after this. Even though the playback locator is still going, the envelope is only letting just this first part play. So that's cool. You can do a lot of interesting things with envelope shaping, actually. I'll probably have to do another video actually explaining all this because there's a lot of ways to go in depth with it, especially with sound design and things like that, and with like synths and all that. But that's the best way I can explain it. Oh my God, that's loud. This is the best way I can explain and give an example of it. And then release is just how long it takes for the sample to become silent after being played. So you notice how previously I said classic only plays for as long as the MIDI note is there, which is true, but with the release, it changes how long it takes for it to let go of the sound. So you'll see here with a normal release of like 50, it'll stop, right? It stops after this note trigger. If I make it longer, you can see that the sound is extended, right? Right, it keeps going. I usually use this for like 808s actually. If I want the 808 to not just stop abruptly, but kind of like fade out a little bit, I'll extend its release just a bit. Like, here we go. Let me get a spins. Like, say I want it to play, but I don't want it to just stop like that. I still want it to like fade out a bit. I'll increase the release. And that's pretty much everything for the simpler. The sampler has a lot of the same things, but a lot more things. So, you know, not to make things too complicated, I'll just make another video for the sampler because there's kind of a lot more stuff. Really, the sampler just has a lot more controls that you can do compared to like, there's a lot of shit here. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Simpler, I usually use for 808s. I'll use for one-shot sounds, or I'll use for like, if I like how a sound already sounds by itself, like the sample already, and I don't want to mess with it too much. I want to preserve the sound, but I still want to manipulate it with MIDI. That's when I would use the simpler. If I like the sound and I want to mess with it and then do something interesting with it, I would use the sampler instead. And next video will be about the sampler, probably. Oh, I forgot to talk about retrigger, huh? I'll do that on the next one too.